The last time anyone saw little Emma Hartfield, she was chasing fireflies at the forest's edge, her yellow dress bright against the darkening pines. Her mother, Claire, had turned away for only a moment to hang washing on the line. When she looked back, the clearing was empty except for one small shoe lying in the grass. By nightfall, Millbrook had transformed from a sleepy mountain town into a powder keg of fear. Lanterns bobbed between houses as neighbors formed search parties. Dogs barked themselves hoarse, and slowly, inevitably, eyes began turning toward the cottage at the forest's border where Daniel Mercer lived alone. Daniel was a carpenter, 32 years old, with burn scars that twisted the left side of his face, a reminder of the fire that had taken his wife 3 years prior. He kept to himself, spoke little, and that silence had always made people uncomfortable. Now it made them suspicious. "He's always watching from those windows," Martha Green hissed to her husband as they joined the search. "Never quite right, that one." By midnight, a crowd had gathered outside Daniel's door. Sheriff Tom Brennan tried to maintain order, but the questions came like accusations. "Where were you this evening? Do you know the Hartfield girl? Why do you live so close to where she disappeared?" Daniel answered each question with quiet honesty, but honesty isn't what frightened people want. They want certainty. They want someone to blame. Watching from the ridge above town, Isla Ravenna saw it all unfold. Most people called her the Fox Woman, partly for the russet color of her wild hair, partly for eyes that caught the light strangely, amber and knowing. She lived even deeper in the forest than Daniel, in a cabin her grandmother had built, making her living through woodcraft and herbal remedies that the town bought secretly but spoke of with suspicion. She had been checking her snares when she'd heard the commotion. Now, observing the mob's gathering energy, she felt a familiar disgust. Fear was making them stupid. But something else bothered her more. The forest was wrong tonight. Too quiet. The owls had stopped calling, and the wind carried a scent she recognized from old stories her grandmother had told, stories the town had forgotten. Isla descended into the trees, moving with the silence that came from a lifetime in these woods. Near where Emma had vanished, she knelt and studied the ground with hands that knew how to read the earth. The child's tracks were clear enough, small prints in the soft soil, but overlaying them were others, not quite prints, more like impressions where something heavy had disturbed the earth without fully touching it. She ran her fingers along a birch trunk and found deep gouges 8 feet high. No bear could reach that height. No mountain lion left marks like these. Isla stood slowly, her pulse quickening not with fear but with grim recognition. The old hunger had awakened.
By morning, Daniel Mercer had been arrested. Sheriff Brennan hadn't wanted to do it. There was no evidence, no cause. But the crowd outside the jail had swelled to 50 people, then 70. Fear had fermented overnight into rage, and rage demanded satisfaction. Daniel sat in the cell, staring at his scarred hands. He'd told the truth. He'd been home alone, working on a rocking chair commission. He had no alibi because he had no one. The isolation that had helped him survive his grief now condemned him. The door to the jail opened, and Isla walked in, ignoring Martha Green's sharp curse from outside. Sheriff Brennan looked up wearily. "You shouldn't be here," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. "Neither should he," Isla replied, nodding toward the cell. "You know Daniel didn't take that child." "What I know doesn't matter much right now," Brennan rubbed his face. "Tell me you found something in those woods. Anything." Isla had spent the night tracking. She'd followed the not-quite prints to a ravine where the limestone bedrock showed ancient carvings, warnings in a language older than English. The marks on the trees continued in a pattern, circling an area where the ground was disturbed, as if something had burrowed up from beneath. "The child's alive," Isla said quietly, "but not for long if we don't act." Daniel looked up at her words, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time. What did you find? Brennan leaned forward. Something that won't care about your jail cell or your mob, Isla said. Something old. It took Emma because it's hungry and it's been asleep a long time. Brennan wanted to dismiss her words as superstition, but he'd lived in these mountains long enough to know that some old stories persisted for good reason. His own grandfather had spoken of creatures in the deep woods, things that predated the settlers. "Can you find her?" he asked. "I can track the creature," Isla said, "but I need time, and I need that crowd dispersed before they do something irreversible." Outside, the mob's energy was building. Someone had brought rope. The word justice was being used the way it always was when people meant vengeance. Brennan made a decision. "I'll give you until sunset. But, Isla, if you're wrong about this, I'm not." As Isla turned to leave, Daniel spoke for the first time. "Why are you helping me?" She paused at the door, glancing back at the scarred man in the cell. "Because I know what it's like to be blamed for what you are instead of what you've done," she said quietly. "And because that little girl deserves better than a town too frightened to see the truth." The forest was waiting, and the real monster was still hungry.
Isla moved through the forest like smoke, following signs invisible to untrained eyes. The creature's path wove between ancient oaks, avoiding clearings, keeping to shadows even in daylight. It was clever, far more clever than any animal. She'd brought provisions and weapons, her grandmother's iron knife, salt mixed with dried wolfsbane, and something more dangerous, knowledge. The old stories spoke of the Hollow Walker, a creature that had hunted these mountains before the first settlers arrived. It fed on fear and flesh, hibernating for generations beneath the earth, waking only when hunger drove it up through the limestone caves. The tracks led her deeper than she'd gone in years, to places where the trees grew so thick that noon felt like twilight. Here the modern world fell away. No cell phone signal, no sound of distant traffic, only the primordial quiet of old-growth forest. She found Emma's other shoe caught on a thorn bush, small and yellow against the dark undergrowage. The child had been carried here, not walking. Fresh breaks in the vegetation showed recent passage, something large pushing through. Then she heard it, faint but unmistakable, crying. Isla ran, abandoning stealth for speed, following the sound to a ravine where the earth had collapsed inward, revealing a cave mouth that exhaled cold, mineral-scented air. The crying came from within. She lit her torch and descended. The cave system was vast, limestone formations creating cathedral spaces in the darkness. Her torchlight caught movement, not Emma, but something else. Something that moved wrong, with too many joints in its limbs, its body covered in earth and moss like a thing that belonged underground. The Hollow Walker. It watched her with eyes that reflected her torchlight red, intelligent and alien. In the creature's makeshift nest, she saw Emma, unconscious but breathing, placed carefully like a meal being saved for later. Isla understood then. The creature wasn't just hungry. It was patient. It had taken Emma to draw more victims to the forest. Every person who came searching was potential prey. The town's fear would bring them one by one into the darkness. "She's not yours," Isla said, surprised by the steadiness of her voice. The creature tilted its head, studying her. Then it smiled, an expression that should have been impossible on that inhuman face, and spoke in a voice like wind through hollow trees. "The scarred man will burn tonight. They've built the pyre. Your town wants blood. Give them yours instead. Leave the child, walk away, or stay and feed me together." Isla's hand tightened on her knife. The creature was right. By now, the mob would have overwhelmed Brennan's resistance. Daniel would die for a crime he didn't commit, while the real monster waited underground, patient as stone. She had to choose, save the innocent man or the innocent child, or find a way to save both. Isla made her decision in an instant. "I'm taking the child," she said, moving toward Emma's small form, "and you're going to let me."
The Hollow Walker laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. Brave little fox. Your grandmother was brave too when she sealed me beneath the earth. But seals break. Time makes fools of all protections. So that's what the carvings had been. Her grandmother's work, a binding that had finally weakened. Isla felt a surge of understanding mixed with grief. Her grandmother had known this creature, had fought it, had bought the town decades of safety they'd never known to be grateful for. You're weak, Isla observed, noting how the creature kept its distance despite its threats. You've only just woken. You need Emma to regain your strength. The creature's smile faded. I'm giving you a choice, Isla continued, her mind working rapidly. Let me take the child, or I burn this entire cave system with you in it. The town wants fire tonight. Let's see how you like it. She pulled a flask of lamp oil from her pack, uncorking it deliberately. The creature hissed, pressing back into the shadows. Fire was its old enemy, the one thing it truly feared. You wouldn't. The child would die too. Then you'd better move quickly. They stared at each other in the torchlight, predator and protector, each measuring the other's will. Finally, the Hollow Walker retreated further into the cave's depths. Take her, it rasped. But the scarred man burns regardless. Your town has chosen its villain. By dawn, they'll have forgotten the child in their satisfaction. Isla gathered Emma into her arms. The girl was cold but alive, her pulse steady. You're safe. I've got you. But even as she said it, she could see smoke rising from the direction of town. They hadn't waited for sunset. The pyre was already burning. Isla ran, the child clutched against her chest, racing against flames and fury. The forest blurred around her as she pushed her body to its limits, her heart hammering, not from exertion, but from desperate hope that she wasn't too late. The smell of burning wood grew stronger with every step.
Isla burst into the town square as the first torch touched the pyre. "Stop!" Her voice cut through the crowd's roar. Every face turned toward her and toward the small figure in her arms. Emma Hartfield, dirty and frightened, but unmistakably alive. Claire Hartfield's scream was pure relief. She pushed through the crowd, pulling her daughter from Isla's arms, sobbing as she checked Emma for injuries. The crowd's energy shifted, confusion replacing bloodlust. Sheriff Brennan moved quickly, pulling Daniel back from the pyre before the flames could spread. The carpenter collapsed to his knees, shaking with shock and relief. "Where was she?" someone shouted. "What happened?" Isla stood before them all, breathing hard, her clothes torn from running through underbrush, her hands still gripping the iron knife. She looked at their faces, frightened, angry, ashamed, and made another choice. "There's a creature in the caves beneath the old forest," she said clearly. "Something ancient that feeds on fear and flesh. It took Emma to draw more of you into the woods. Your panic made you easy prey." Silence. Then Martha Greensworth, sharp with disbelief. "You expect us to believe in monsters?" "You already do," Isla replied, gesturing toward Daniel. "You created one out of an innocent man because it was easier than facing the truth. You wanted someone to blame, someone to punish, because that made you feel safe. But safety built on lies is no safety at all." She walked toward Daniel, extending her hand. He took it, letting her help him stand. "This man is guilty of nothing but surviving his grief quietly. While you were building your pyre, I was saving Emma from a real threat, one that's still out there, one that will wait for you to forget and fear again." Sheriff Brennan stepped forward. "The caves, can we seal them?" "My grandmother did once. It can be done again." Isla looked at him steadily. "But it requires knowledge you've dismissed as superstition. It requires trusting someone you've called witch and worse." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. They were people who attended church every Sunday, who prided themselves on rationality and modern thinking. Yet here stood their children's savior, speaking of old magic and ancient threats.
Claire Hartfield broke the stalemate. She approached Isla, Emma still in her arms, and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Thank you, for my daughter, for seeing the truth." One by one, others came forward. Not everyone. Some still blared, still doubted. But enough to matter. Daniel approached last, his scarred face wet with tears. "I thought I'd die tonight." We all die eventually, but not today, not like that. As dawn broke over Millbrook, Isla and Sheriff Brennan planned the sealing of the caves. The Hollow Walker's words echoed in her mind. It would wait, it would return, but for now, the town had learned a harder lesson. Sometimes the real monsters are the ones we create from our own fear. And sometimes the truth has amber eyes and refuses to look away.